let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're happy to welcome back to the show our good friend Sammy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Good, how are ya?
Yeah, can't complain.
Can't complain. Fair enough. I'd like to once again impress on people the joys, the wonder, the mystery that is podcasting, because Tim's in America, I'm in the UK, you are on the east coast of Australia, so our time zones right now are just sort of pinging across the, I was about to say proverbial planet. No, not proverbial, literal planet. We are triangulating somewhat, so that's quite fantastic. So thank you for being up cracker sparrows to talk to us today.
Not a problem. I've been doing this all month with my podcast. It seems to be just the best time to do it. 7 a.m. It's nice afternoon in the US, and it's late, but not too late in the UK.
Yeah, it's that you kind of forget at some stage, even though you know that there's people around the world, like you do kind of forget that, no, the whole planet is like a 24-hour situation. And so that like, even at this moment, it's 4 a.m. somewhere. Somebody is dead asleep. And like, you just forget that actually it takes a lot to try and get everyone around the world like to make the thing work at some given time. So, bless you for being here. And before we get into the meat of today's episode, you mentioned you have a podcast of your own, and we may or may not have covered it previously on the pod, but just for a quick reminder for the people, what's your podcast about?
It is called The Bondage Gaze. That's Gaze. Not to be confused with the other spelling of gaze, which my husband, he thought the podcast was spelt that way for 2 years. But no prizes for guessing. It is about bondage.
James, do you notice that your accent gets thicker whenever you talk to another Aussie?
Does it?
Yes.
Listeners, if you are tuning in today and you are a regular listener of the podcast and you feel that my accent is more Australian today than normal, please feel free to write into thiccradio@gmail.com or DM me and we'll see if I give a fuck. But no, it's always wonderful to have another Aussie on the pod.
I'm sure they're sitting at home thinking, we don't want to listen to this bogan cunt anymore. He just brings out James's worst parts.
Absolutely. Well, James's worst parts are his only parts, so they're used to it by now. But no, we today are talking about a little known TV show called The Biggest Loser. Because obviously everyone's fucking heard of The Biggest Loser. Everybody's watched The Biggest Loser. For clarification for listeners, you yourself, Sammy, are not in the gainer community, but I would imagine many of us, when we were younger, loved watching The Biggest Loser, at least the first couple of episodes, because we never got to see fats on TV. And that was our excuse to watch enormous bodies and ogle them wildly, right? Part of what we're going to talk about today is unpacking the fat-phobic bias that exists with all of that. But we're here to chit-chat about this TV show because you've been a fan of the show, and I don't know, no time like the present. So listen, you ready to get into it?
Ladies and gents, it's time to cut the fat.
Oh, stop it. The memories.
I probably just gave everyone a bit of PTS. I apologize.
Is that how they opened every episode?
It was an elimination.
Oh, was that elimination?
Tagline. And everybody hated it. Like, the host has even come out recently and said, I begged the producers, like, every show, like, don't make me say it. I don't want to say it. But they'd make her say it.
It's so stupid. And I mean, that's kind of there's a lot we can say about the show, but obviously let's start this episode with just some basic little statistics. So The Biggest Loser is a weight loss reality TV show that started in 2004, and it has run for a large number of seasons. Quite incredible, actually. So in the United States, there are 18 seasons. In Germany, there's 16. Between Austria and Scandinavia, there was 11 of each. In Ukraine, there was 9. In Argentina, the Netherlands, and Paraguay, there was 7. In Croatia, the UK, and Ireland, there was 5. In Lebanon, China, Finland, Iceland, Israel, and Russia and Spain, they had 4 each. Portugal and Slovenia had 3. Malaysia, Brazil, Philippines, and Puerto Rico had 2. Hungary, India, Latvia, Mexico, Peru, Poland, Romania, Serbia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovakia, South Africa, and Turkey had 1 each. And then Algeria, Jordan, and Thailand also had at least 1 each, which makes for a grand total of at least 152 seasons of The Biggest Loser.
So then is so like it's on par with Drag Race at this point.
Yeah, you know what? Drag Race passed 50 seasons some point last year, and I think they're actually up to 75 now with all of the different franchises that are going on, which is fucking wild. But 150 plus seasons of The Biggest Loser, which is wild. It's around the globe, as was listed with all of those countries. It has made an appearance on every continent, and even though some of those names might be a little bit different here and there, the premise is usually the same. It is a group of overweight contestants who have been brought to a property with trainers and are split into teams and are being worked to the bone every episode to lose the weight so that we can see who loses the most by percentages, because they thought that that was trying to be fair. Like, out of all the things that this show did, they were like, nah, we've got to do percentages because that's what'll make this show fair and reasonable. And then, you know, the people get chopped every week. The person who has the highest percentage of weight loss at the end of the season is the person who wins. Did they win money? They won some money, didn't they?
In the US, it was 250,000. In the Australian one, it was usually around 200,000, but they like to throw in prize money twists all the time.
Yeah. So, you know, there were certainly rewards added to it, and I think the rewards for challenges from memory were just little basic things. It was kind of like Big Brother. You know, like in Big Brother, you do these stupid challenges to debase yourself, and it's always like, win more groceries for the week so you're not just living on rice. And it was kind of the same in The Biggest Loser. It's like, win chocolate that you can eat, or win a phone call home sometimes. And it's just like, oh, God. But listen, what do you remember about the Australian franchise?
I gotta say, initially, I didn't watch the Australian one. My first exposure to the show was in 2004 when the American one was broadcast. And at that point, I was obsessed with Big Brother and Survivor. So I was intrigued, but didn't actually watch the first season. I was 12 at the time, so I can't remember if maybe at the time it was too close to home or I just never got around to it. My exposure was mostly from the commercials. I remember them promoting the show as 2 teams of contestants. One team would eat less, one team would eat more. The Eat More voiceover was conveniently pasted over the heaviest contestant, standing in front of a massive pile of cupcakes. No points for guessing that scene was taken hugely out of context. Then, weeks later, the promos were, they lost this weight, now they have to put it back on. And that really turned me off the idea of even watching it at all. I thought the show must have had some weird, like, Joe Millionaire-esque gimmick. Of course, as with the Eat Well versus Eat More, that was just complete advertising hyperbole. In reality, it was just a challenge where the contestants had to put backpacks on filled with weights, which, I mean, that's problematic in itself. But I started casually watching during the second season. And at that point, I didn't really have any strong opinions on the weight loss aspect, beyond thinking that the show was genuinely trying to help these contestants and inspire others. I just thought it was a reality show with an interesting concept and a good format. And to properly answer your question, the same goes really for the first Aussie one. I just kind of tuned in and out and had the same thoughts.
Tim, what about for yourself? Like, because we're talking this period of the early 2000s, and I know you often reference like growing up in the 90s and that kind of late millennium approach, you know, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, you know, that really...
Oh, yeah, that bullshit, yeah.
and how like the early 2000s in terms of reality TV was really at its zenith for like just that really nasty vibe where
Yeah, yeah.
human beings. Like, what was your impression of the show?
I mean, full disclosure, I didn't actually watch The Biggest Loser, but I did watch Celebrity Fit Club, which was one of those VH1 shows where they found a bunch of washed up celebrities and put them in a house and made them do things. In this particular iteration, it was celebrities that had put on weight. And I was interested because they had Dustin Diamond and Kevin Federline on that season, and they were both at their fattest. And I knew that the whole point was for them to lose weight, but I just wanted to look at fat Kevin Federline for a while. But also by this point, I was pretty well aware and cynical of how reality television worked. You know, I knew that a lot of it was just for show. It was kind of like watered down Jerry Springer. You know, they would take a bunch of people, isolate them in a house, make them do menial tasks or crazy challenges, and watch what ensues, right? So I didn't take it seriously because I had heard or I had read online, like certain online forums back in the day, that a lot of people who went on weight loss shows always ended up usually gaining the weight back because circumstances changed because they weren't isolated anymore. They had this, you know, they had free access to whatever they had before the show went on. A lot of them kind of didn't keep up with their workout routines. So, you know, they may have lost a significant amount of weight while on camera, but then when they go home like 6 months later, they've gained it back. So I just knew that these shows were a scam. And you have to remember that this was about the time that one of the worst reality shows in history was ever made, called The Swan. And like it was this whole atmosphere of reality television at the time was all about exploitation. And The Swan was one of the worst offenders in that category. It was a show where they took women who considered themselves ugly and put them through thousands and thousands of dollars worth of cosmetic surgery to make them their idealized selves. And it was like I can only imagine the psychological scars that left on people.
I mean, that immediately makes me think of, there was the British show Fat Families, and you had that awful presenter who would basically just go around and be like, I'm going to this household of big, fat, wobbling fatties, and I'm going to help them lose weight before they die. And I just remember, like, I think it was even the first episode, he goes to this house, and it's the little boy that opens the door, and he's like, hello, fatties, mum and dad fatty home? Or something like that. And I'm like, this is a 9-year-old. This is a 10-year-old. Like, this is not okay. And this man, I believe to this day, is still very much like, I'm helping big, wobbling, fat laddies lose the Tubbingtons, very that kind of commentary. And it's just so much to process. And as much as I understand, reality TV, people submit themselves to these things. I do feel like there is a comment worth making here that you don't see that kind of language being used for any other category of person. Tim, you've mentioned this. There was Flavor of Love, and then there was
Yeah,
Charm School or Finishing School
yeah.
or something like a sequel series. Like, did they make a point of calling these girls like, hello, ugly sluttos, you loose cunts, you...
Not no, not in that particular way, but in shows like those dating shows specifically, there was a difference between how they scouted who they wanted on the show versus some of these other ones. Like most of the women who have appeared on those dating shows have admitted that they either didn't know who like they were supposed to be dating, but they didn't care because it was an opportunity to be on television. And some of them were told up front who was going to be like the person they were supposed to be chasing after, and they were okay with it because they're like, this is an opportunity. Most of them have admitted to playing some kind of character version of themselves on film. Like Tiffany Pollard has many times said that like New York was a character. This is not really who I am. It was just a character. It got me attention. It got me TV shows and appearances. I did what I did. Now, something like this, I feel is probably a lot more like what America's Next Top Model used to do. And if you don't know anything about that show, I would encourage you guys to look up what the women who have been on that show have to say about it since the NDAs have all expired. A lot of people get scouted and they're kind of given a lot of promises and offers and like, this can be so good for you, this can be so great, this could potentially launch a whole new career for you, or it could change your life, yada yada. And these producers will blow all this smoke up the contestants' ass to get them to agree And then once you sign the piece of paper that says that you agree to do whatever they say and you've given your consent for it to be on television and you have no control over the editing or what light they're going to cast you in or what storyline they're going to come up with, because I do not put it past weight loss shows to also come up with storylines for the purposes of drama. They find that they have been submitted to a system that doesn't give a shit about them at all, that they're just being exploited for the purpose of entertainment. You know, I think there's a huge difference between a producer telling you this is going to be so great for your life, you'll reinvent yourself, your life will be so much better, and someone saying, hey, we both know this is bullshit, but are you willing to be on TV? You know.
Yeah, I distinctly remember, and I can't remember which season this was, but there was an episode very early on where the female red team trainer was pushing one of the contestants so hard, like she threw up everywhere, and like she couldn't get outside in time. Like she was sick all over like the treadmill that she was on at the time. And there was this moment where, like, obviously she's so embarrassed, she's gasping for breath, and she needs a break, and she's like trying not to cry. And then the trainer is just like screaming at her. Like, I just remember this moment because, as I say, when I was a young person first watching it, I knew that my interest was getting to see big people and I wanted to see them shirtless. Very biased, but that was the tea. But then the moment you go past that initial impression, you are faced with very much what the content of these shows are about. And it's very, very, I almost want to say violent in their approach to anti-fatness. Because, you know, Aubrey Gordon talks about this. There was like a line that I think Michelle Bridges was the American one, right? Like she'd said to a contestant, no, was she the Australian one?
Yeah, you might be thinking of Gillian Michaels.
Gillian Michaels, one of the two, but she'd said to somebody like you're either gonna lose weight or leave here in a body bag, you know, and it's like it's just this rhetoric where it's like we would rather see you dead than be fat, right? And as much as I can, you know, again, that premise of look, if you want to lose weight and it's helping people to lose weight, like brilliant, but also when that's what you're faced with, like it's not even saying, hey, we want you to lose weight because it's for your own good. It's like you have to be punished while you lose weight, you know? So I think, especially as the years have gone by, I don't know that gainers really talk about Biggest Loser anymore. I certainly think they did do a little bit back in like 2014 time, like, you know, kind of started the Grommr era. But I certainly don't hear people talking about it now. And I don't think the show really runs anymore either. I think like the diet and fitness industry has kind of rebranded itself as like the wellness industry is the term I see a lot more of now. Like, we just want you to be well. There's also this like, you know, western suburbs of Sydney accent that goes on. It's very it's trying very hard to be Julia Gillard. It's very, we just want you to be well. We just want you to meditate. And if you could consider cauliflower pizza. And you know, gluten-free really is the best. Did you know that if you blend together some grass clippings and some organic moss and some eggs, you've just made the perfect gluten-free, FODMAP-friendly, low-calorie pizza crust for you and the kiddies on a Wednesday night.
Say, James, you have just unlocked a actually quite recent memory, but it's something I forgot about. There was one of our trainers that did a advertisement for some like light and easy or something like that. And it actually started by her dressed, I guess she's supposed to look like a hippie or a hobo. I don't know what she's supposed to be, but she goes out and eats a cup of dirt. And then she's like, you know, you don't have to grow your own veggies like a freak. And then promotes this light and easy meal. It's like, wow, that is such a bad look. It's such a bad image. So there you go. If you grow your own veggies, you're a freak.
Yes, that's that. I mean, again, I think this points to a very specific form of just bad faith ethics that goes on in the world. Like, you know, I've said this before. If you translated some of the justifications that people used to be mean to fat people and made it about any other category of human, black people, women, people with disabilities, the trans community, it is going to look absolutely terrible and the internet would tear you apart for it. And yet, when you say it about fat people just go, oh yeah, that's just how it is.
Well, that's the last frontier, really. That's the last place where it's perfectly acceptable to mock someone in public for it, degrade them on television for it, talk down to them for it. And something that really chaps my ass is that I remember, actually, I don't remember, and this is the problem, is at the time that they had all these weight loss shows like Biggest Loser, Celebrity Fit Club, and all the other crap that was out there on reality television. I don't remember anyone going after all of the cooking shows on Food Network that would teach you how to cook extremely decadent and very, calorie rich recipes. Like, I don't remember anyone coming after Nigella Lawson. I don't remember anyone coming after Paula Deen until we found out she was a racist. I don't remember anyone going after Guy Fieri.
We did have Huey, and he had a book and a show, Never Trust a Skinny Chef. And I do think that, again, it's this weird duplicity that goes on of fat is bad, and yet this is kind of acceptable because, yes, he's a fat man, he's obviously very well fed, but also you go, well, this man is a cook, he's a chef, he's cooking delicious, decadent food. He's allowed to be fat because his whole job is around food. That makes sense. You're only having the one meal, and so you're going to stay nice and thin and trim. Versus these other fatties, they clearly can't stop themselves. Like, it's this unspoken implication about how someone arrives at the point of obesity and the judgments that we allow ourselves to think and feel about people. Again, very coded, but interesting to start to pick apart because, again, The Biggest Loser has to be one of the most prominent shows in human history where we have seen this just in action. I want to ask you all here, like, do you feel like you recognized changes occurring in the show over the years, like potentially in response to public outcry or to the way that contestants handled things on previous seasons?
Okay, a lot of the changes I noticed were more material. So really it was just the show growing. The show basically expanded upon itself. Initially it was a 1 hour a week show following a rough format of workout, challenge, workout, weigh-in, elimination. And then we got the local version, which was expanded to 5 nights a week. So that meant there were extra challenges, extra temptations. Then they added a 6th night. So that just meant twists and gimmicks, basically more of the stuff that defeated the purpose of what the show was supposed to be about. In later years, new trainers were added, casting stunts such as couples, families, singles looking for love, because it really promoted the, oh, you're fat, so you must be single and lonely. Then the show trimmed itself down a bit. I'm not sure if that was just trying to keep itself fresh, but I think it was more due to failing ratings. By that point, I didn't really watch much of the American version, but I still loosely followed it. And whilst it didn't seem as gimmicky as the Australian version, it certainly wasn't without its own ridiculous antics and bloated episode counts. All that being said, there were 2 very notable changes. In 2017, we had the final Australian version, which was promoted as The Biggest Loser Transformed. It was aimed at focusing less on the weight loss and more on health and quote unquote transforming the contestants. There was still a prize for the most weight lost, but the grand prize was for the contestant the public voted as most transformed. There were massive changes to casting. The average weight of the contestants was much lower. So instead of having contestants aiming to shed copious amounts of body weight, there were people basically just wanting to tone up. Add in the low budget feel of this new show, a format that made almost no sense, and flat out what the fuck moments, such as having this psychiatrist come in and talk the contestants through imagining a mental meal as an alternative to eating perceived unhealthy foods. That was the moment I tuned out. All these changes just resulted in a ratings erosion, and it got shifted to a 1 p.m. time slot and then cancelled. As much as people don't want to admit it, they watch the show. Really, like you said, people judge fat people in a way they wouldn't judge any other community, and they wanted to feel good about themselves seeing these people that are 200 kilos, whereas no one wants to watch the 80-kilo person just trying to build some muscle, because then they have to confront their own insecurities. A similar change happened in the American version. It was cancelled in 2016, allegedly after all the mistreatment and unhealthy practices came to light. but I think it was also failing ratings. So in 2020, an attempt was made to do the show right, with a focus on a healthy lifestyle in addition to the weight loss. Temptations were removed, voting was removed, eliminated contestants were given access to gym memberships, support groups, and nutritionalists. This only lasted one season, which admittedly I haven't seen. It's been on my watch list for ages. I just haven't got around to it. So I can't vouch for the changes, but I have heard that it was a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by that at all. And it also doesn't surprise me that it only lasted one season when they tried to reboot it in 2020 because everybody was in lockdown and sentiments were changing. Like when you said it got canceled in 2016, yeah, that's because I mean honestly, I feel like that might be the fulcrum on which like the American opinion began to swing at that point because we we had Trump running for president. We had no, sorry, he was president by November of 2016. So like things were just different and people really didn't, I guess we just moved on. We didn't have time for this crap anymore. And we just got sick and tired of seeing people being exploited. There was so much information that was coming out about reality television now that all these non-disclosure agreements had expired and people were getting the truth about what was going on with the production teams. And yeah, I think we just all collectively got sick of it.
In fact, even as we were talking, Sammy, you were speaking, and it reminded me of my mother's voice going, "Oh, it's time to watch my fatties." Like, that was her way of saying, "Oh, it's time for Biggest Loser. This is now the family sit down," because it was at that 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. time slot, right when we were having dinner, so it's like, time for fatties, everyone sit down. Like, and there's no thought about also the irony of sitting down and like eating whatever your food is while you're watching these people. And again, I think it paints this really, really awful picture of like, we can sit here and do whatever we want because we're thin. And so it doesn't matter that we're sitting on the couch eating our meals because we don't eat too much food and it's not bad food. Whereas them, they have to do this. They need to do this. And it's one of those things that I've found I constantly come back to in my own gaining journey. Not because of biases necessarily, but because of, again, growing up, that was one of the most consistent reference points I had to seeing fat people in the world. And so when I was developing my own sense of fantasy and pleasure when coming out and experiencing gaining for the first time, Biggest Loser ended up being some of my reference points. And so I have had to detangle that over the years. Tim, I know you said that you didn't necessarily engage much with the show yourself, but do you find that shows like The Biggest Loser and all its variations, do you find like because of those types of programs, you had to really kind of rethink your approach to fatness in your own journey?
No, because like I said, I didn't engage with it, so it didn't really become something that I drew from with my own gaining experience. That solely came from the community, just community members, seeing guys on Grommr, seeing guys on, I don't know if it was Instagram at the time, but just Tumblr, Belly Builders, Grommr, all those places where we congregate. That was who I drew all of my inspiration and my desire from other members of the community. I really didn't consider any kind of visual media at the time.
Thinking about it in this context as well, like the show was always plagued by drama as well. Like, I think obviously the first couple of seasons, it's kind of like with Drag Race, right? As a common queer reference point, queens, and we know this, went on much more authentically in the first couple of seasons, and then after a certain point kind of learned it's reality TV. If you want to be a queen who makes it all the way to the end, if you want to be a queen that gets asked back for All Stars, you have to rely on personality and drama to often navigate those kinds of storylines, which can be very toxic, but it's oftentimes what people do to succeed in the competition. And realistically, there is a monetary prize at the end. So it's not surprising that people are motivated to do such things. I know that things like this happened with The Biggest Loser. Sammy, can you speak to any of those types of scenarios that you might be aware of?
I can't think of any specific examples, but there were, like, I rewatched the first season of the Aussie version maybe 2 years ago, and there was this sort of transparency almost, like watching the confessionals, There were pauses. There were people saying, it felt very unedited and very raw. But we all know, as reality TV has progressed, frankenbiting is a huge problem in the reality TV industry. Now, frankenbiting, for those who aren't aware, is when producers will cherry pick certain parts of sentences and mash them together so it sounds like a contestant is saying something completely different. The example I like to use is, say on one day, Tim, you say, "Oh, James cooked dinner for me tonight. It was delicious." And then on another day, you say, "Oh, my dog shit on the floor. I'm going to rub that cunt's nose in it." Now, you shouldn't be rubbing your dog's nose in stuff, but what will make it onto the show is, "Oh, James cooked me dinner. I'm going to rub that cunt's nose in it."
Blame it on the edit.
Yes.
100%. I was thinking, I can't remember the specific details, but I know somebody talked about this not too long ago. Like, certain contestants would basically wait cycle while they were on the show. So people would, knowing that they were bigger, because remember, like, there was the promise of $200,000 on the line here. So what people would do was acknowledge, hey, I'm already chubby or I'm already fat. I know it's not that difficult to eat. I'm deliberately going to gavage myself until I am a much larger person, therefore more appealing to be asked on the show. And it's not going to be hard for me because I'm going to be in this diet context to not eat all the food I was just eating, and I'm going to drop the weight rapidly. Or there were people who had, like, snuck diuretics in their package. So basically every night when they would, like, do their bedtime rituals, they would basically, like, just down, like, an unhealthy amount of diuretics and just, like, shit all through the night, the day before weigh-in, so that they were, like, gaunt, stretched, looking like this. And unfortunately, people do know how to do those things, because we see this conversation also happening in, like, muscle competition spaces in order to, like, look the most jacked. And in fact, Chris Evans talked about this when he did Captain America. And in a lot of these Marvel movies, they encourage you not only to, like, get jacked, but also to dehydrate the day before you do the shoot, because everything just sucks in, pinches in. So not only do you have muscles, you have the most sinewy, you have the most, like, the crevices, and you just have all this most definition, because your body is actually starving itself, like, in order to look like that. So, that kind of information is out there for the people who are doing these things and know how to make it look better. So for someone who's on a reality TV show wanting to win $200,000, I can see very easily why someone would be like, this could possibly give me kidney stones, but I'm just going to slam all of this and hope for the best.
But enough about Simone.
Ooh. Now that's an interesting character to talk about in relation to all of this. Sammy, you look like you have something to say there.
Not about him, but I have a few examples. The winner of the 6th Australian season, Emma Duncan, she went from 108 kilos to 134 kilos before filming started, just by intentionally overindulging so she would have an easier time losing half her body weight. She ended up losing 46%. So she was 6 foot tall, weighing 72 kilos or 158 pounds at the time of the final weigh-in. She stated that she hated herself at that weight. She felt like she was too thin, too sickly looking, and it made her skin too loose. So just by rehydrating, she regained 13 kilos or 28 pounds in a matter of weeks. It's well known that contestants do often dehydrate before the final weigh-in, and the final weigh-in is actually filmed a few days in advance. No surprise to anyone, those big fancy scales where the numbers jump up and down are fake. The final weigh-in's already happened. That gives time for the contestants to rehydrate and start looking human again, because they are all gaunt. Some have said they were that dehydrated they were urinating blood. And on the diuretic topic, there was a winner of the Australian version that allegedly was getting family to smuggle in tea tree oil in care packages, which he was then drinking to induce vomiting.
And was it AJ Rochester? Was she the one who did the TikToks, like she was just going off, or was that the American one?
No, AJ's TikToks. She shares a lot of very useful information. Would highly recommend her TikToks.
Yeah, I just remember seeing one that got recommended to me. She was like, oh, fuck, I just absolutely cracked the shits. I was not doing well with this. And of course, I can appreciate a good bitch who will fucking go there in the comments. But I think even she talked about this. She was the host, and then she was no longer the host because being on that show, she got fat. And didn't she get replaced or something like that happened?
Yeah, there was a bit of controversy surrounding that. I think there were a lot of reasons. There was a lot of infighting between her and allegedly Michelle Bridges. There's been a few allegations there that she was just horrible to AJ, horrible to contestants.
And she had the affair with the commando, didn't she?
Correct, yes.
Oh, fuck. Oh, and he was, listen, Tim, I may be a fat lover, but that commando, oh, holy shit. He could split me from asshole to breakfast. He is a fit.
Now, there is something about a man in a military uniform.
Yeah, and that was his whole shtick, is just a fucking fit dude, former, like, SAS officer, fucking cargo tracks, big boots, black tank, shaved head, like fucking wraparound sunnies, arms crossed, fucking the kind of dude you want to skull fuck you into the great, just fucking hot. And so honestly, when I heard that he had an affair with Michelle Bridges, I was like, it should have been me. I wish it was me. Oh god. But yeah, no, and it's interesting how much controversy comes around on this bloody show. Oh my god.
AJ has spoken about how when she got styled for the first episode, a producer allegedly said to her, yeah, no, we're not having your fat arms on TV like that. And she was not, I would not call this woman fat at all. But they made her wear a jacket because she was TV fat. I even remember...
Anytime that they call one of these people fat, they never are. I mean, like, if you truly look at some of the people that have experienced that, who have been told, oh, you look too fat on camera. Oh, this costume isn't going to fit you because it's too small, because you're too chubby, yada, yada. Like, it's never someone that is actually fat. You know, it's like people that we would look at and be like, I don't know, like, what, she's a size 4? Is that what the problem is? Like, your sample sizes only come in size 2? Is that what the issue is? Like, get the fuck over it. Like Marilyn Monroe was a size 16. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. There were a lot of derogatory comments made about AJ from people I was watching the show with. I even remember there was a time where the contestants had to pull, I think it was a plane, or a plane, a train, something. They did that challenge every season. It varied what they had to pull. But someone I was watching it with commented, they should give the contestants the choice. Do they want to pull the plane or do they want to pull AJ? And this woman is not fat by any means. It's disgusting.
See, this I think points to, and look, for the sake of the podcast and brevity and everything, like, we know this, like, fat phobia affects everyone across the spectrum of size, and this is kind of the point of saying that, you know, even the concept of fatness is subjective, because you can look at anyone of any given size and go, well, that person's fat. AJ, I wouldn't call her fat. Other people decided to call her fat. And it's this question of, where do you draw the line? You can't, because ultimately it's an ambiguous and amorphous term. And the ill treatment of fat people means that it doesn't matter who it is, the largest of the large or the smallest of the small. Each and every one of us lives in some semblance of fear about what if that ire is turned on us. And it relies on people of a certain size banding together and pointing outwards and going, it's not me, it's you, you're the one.
Well, I love what you just said, because, you know, with perception being reality and beauty in the eye of the beholder, if you completely, let's like throw all the medical stuff away for a second and just think about, you know, people as people. Fatness is something that is then thrust upon you. You are called fat. Because in your perception, you might not be. And in the perception of people who are around you, love you, maybe they honestly don't think of you that way. But then you meet that one son of a bitch who's like, you're a little tubby, aren't you? And then it's like, I mean, what the fuck?
You did that impression too well. That was just like a stereotypical bitchy
the whole,
club gay guy.
You're a little tubby, aren't you? Oh, yeah, because I had that lobbed at me when I was only like maybe 150, 160 pounds. You know, someone was talking to my husband at the time and referred to me as, who's that evil chubby boy you're And I was like, well, if I look evil, I'll take that, because I do have resting bitch face and I don't like you. The fat part at the time, I was like, I am not even the fattest person in the bar at the moment.
So something else I think that's worth bringing in here about this show in particular is how, and we talked about this before. The majority of the contestants, not even a few, not even some, not even half, but a majority of the contestants have actually regained all of the weight post show and then some. And this is probably one of the few benefits of The Biggest Loser that I think are really worth addressing here. Because this show was the only thing that talked about fat people on TV, it meant that this was the only place information was coming from. Like, for all this historic data of fad diets and Zinfandel and fucking all sorts that have gone on over the years, there is no bigger case study for the effects of weight loss, especially in a liminal space, than The Biggest Loser. And what's really interesting is how a lot of that information suggests that that kind of enforced dieting is actually worse for the body and worse for weight loss overall, because it resets your caloric intake balance to a much lower level. So your body only needs to intake, the average human is like, what, 2,000? Some of these contestants were measured, and I don't know how they run these calculations, but some people were measured as low as 600 calories, meaning their body subsisted on 600 a day, and then the rest went immediately to fat. So even if they ate nothing but the healthiest of healthy foods, they were still stacking the weight back on and then some, because their caloric balance was completely out of whack because of this. Sammy, did you come across any of this when you were looking at bits and pieces for the show?
I did. I have a few notable examples. Based on what you've said, there was a study conducted on the cast of the 8th American season. The study was on 14 participants. All but one had gained weight, and 4 are heavier now than before they competed on the show. So, as you said, the study showed that these contestants' metabolism slowed down. Their bodies are predisposed to return to their pre-show weight. The winner of that season gained 100 pounds after his season, and he has said that he needs to eat 800 calories less than a man his typical size just to maintain his current weight. So he's, at the time, was 295 pounds or 134 kilos. So look, metabolism is one reason why the contestants more than often gain weight after the show. It's clear that some regain weight in rehydration alone. The first American winner apparently regained 32 pounds in 5 days just by hydrating. And he admitted that he quickly slipped back into old habits and found it impossible to stick to a diet and exercise routine as rigorous as what was on the show. So he was back to his original weight within 5 years. And like you said earlier in the show, Tim, there is that fact that when you're on the show, your focus 100% is your diet and exercise. You just cannot maintain that level of activity when you have work, family, housework. Other contestants have stated that they also learnt nothing about how to deal with binge eating while they're on the show and received no support once the camera stopped rolling.
Exactly. Like if they have moments where they are talking to a dietitian or a psychologist, it's only while the camera's rolling. Like these contestants, when they're screened for shows, they have to pass a psychological exam that says basically, are you a danger to yourself or others? Are you going to do something crazy? Are you violent? Shit like that. And if you answer no to all of that, then that's golden. And afterwards, they don't offer you any true support. They might give you the number to a hotline or they might suggest somebody, but they're certainly not going to cover the cost of it. And when you are in a situation like that, you are sequestered. They take you, they put you in a location. You do not have a cell phone. They don't have a landline, so you can't call anybody. And if they have a phone, like it's locked in a room and you only get privileges to use it every once in a while. There's no television, no magazines, no newspapers. I think you're allowed to bring a book with you, but the rest is just they want shit to pop off so that they can have something to film. If there's things to distract you, they're just going to be watching a bunch of people, sitting around, watching TV or being on their phone or whatever. They need to create a pressure cooker kind of situation where they can get that kind of drama out of people. So you have somebody that is pushed to their absolute limit and feels like they are being psychologically tortured. So they have this big freak out moment that they can catch on camera and then they can edit it any way that they want to. It's a completely deceptive, manipulative way of making television.
I mean, we've seen this very famously everyone refers to Laganja Estranja from season 6 of RuPaul's Drag Race. People watched the season and they hated her because they saw a very vapid person who was very uptight and seemed to be spiraling. Yeah, because it turns out the whole marijuana thing was not just a casual thing. She was medically diagnosed as needing marijuana, and they wouldn't let her have her script. So, of course, this person who relies on this drug to maintain their balance came out of balance. And these shows can create these types of scenarios. And it's something I'm so grateful for, that in the 2020s, we are more aware than ever about, you know, this kind of behind the scenes bias that exists in film and TV. I mean, even with something like The Whale, and we've reviewed The Whale and we have our thoughts about it, I'm so chuffed that the majority of people I've spoken to about the film felt deeply unsettled by it. Not because they went, oh, this is the life of a fat person, how sad, but because they went, so much of how this film is presented just feels inauthentic, and it feels like a representation of an idea that people are really beginning to accept just is not the case. I mean, for goodness sake, the man was listed at like 600 pounds. We've had guests that size who were like chilling in their living room and had just gotten up to make themselves a cuppa. You know, like, people don't necessarily have those same issues as what gets represented, and it's not always this idea. And I'm so glad, as I say, that people are knowing that and unpacking that with a show like this. So, Sammy, something I think would be good to bring up here, with your consent, of course, you've spoken publicly about your eating disorder, and I would love to ask you, you know, how this show and this kind of rhetoric has intersected with your diagnosis and your experiences.
So I've struggled with bulimia on and off since I was 16. And I will say that I don't think the show had any influence over that. However, one of the major ways I was influenced by the show, and I imagine this would be very common, is during periods where I was actively trying to lose weight and weighing myself weekly, I would be trying to match the ridiculous amounts of weight lost on the show. During the 2012 season, there was one particular week where I remember I picked a contestant and I made it my goal to beat his weight loss. We both lost 3 kilos that week. I busted my ass to unhealthy levels, but I did it. I did do it through diet and exercise, and I honestly can't say whether my calorie intake was influenced by the show. It was 12 years ago, but I just remember busting my ass. But that brings me to another point. It is very unhealthy, and it is a bad message it sends, because you see these contestants losing such ridiculous amounts of weight in a quote-unquote week. And one, again, it is literally all they're doing. But also, what you see as a week isn't a week. In the American version, contestants have said it varies between 5 and 14 days. A contestant in the Australian version, more extreme, said the shortest period of time between a weigh-in was 16 days. The longest was 25. So...
And you know, it works both ways, honestly. Like, it's dangerous to lose that much weight that quickly. It's also dangerous to gain that much weight that quickly. Like, I don't want people to walk away from this thinking like to do the inverse of that would be fine. Because if you are going up by 5 to 8 pounds or something like that per week, I would be worried about congestive heart failure, because that's a lot of fluid retention. That's not how that should work. And like you said, when some of the contestants were urinating blood, it's because you lose that much weight that quickly, you're sending your kidneys and your liver into shock.
Again, it's so interesting to me that it takes a horrifically abusive show for people to actually take time to pay attention and go, oh, that doesn't actually seem good at the end of the day. Didn't know that this is what happens. And fat people are like, yes, this is the struggle. And honestly, Sammy, a big part of what you said before with the whole people just regain weight because when you're in this space where all you're doing is weight loss, yet no shit, you lose weight. Massive fucking surprise. It's not actually a miracle, right? The miracle would be if you could do that with all of the life pressures added on top. So many of these people were parents, and parents who were working long hours. So of course they were eating crap food, and of course they weren't making nutritious meals because they have worked an 8, 9-hour day. They've come home to however many kids. They've got to cook food for the troops. They get no time to themselves. So it is a lot of instant meals. It is a lot of just cut and dry, frozen veg in a pan, hope it works. Like, there's so much to this that when you actually take a step back and look at it, you go, oh yeah, actually that's kind of obvious. But it's through this magical lens of television and it's amazing what we can do. And people go, yeah, I guess it is kind of amazing, but actually not so much. There's different bits with it. So obviously the show, I don't know, we're kind of coming to the end here, but obviously the show had more to do than just like fat people and trainers. Like there had to be like doctors and dietitians and all the PAs that like run around and like make this shit happen. Like when you were researching the show, did you come across any interesting tidbits around all that?
Absolutely. I've literally made a page and a half of notes, and some of this is mistreatment by trainers as well. But look, we could fill a whole episode with the examples of mistreatment from trainers in production. So we'll start with production. There was a clear message of fat people are bad and deserve to be humiliated. Contestants would be first forced to work out in the mud for no reason at all. They just wanted to put them in the mud. There was a huge focus on food, the fridges full of food in the elimination room, each representing one contestant, confessional rooms full of snacks. Early seasons would start with a last meal where the contestants would be seemingly encouraged to gorge themselves, not to mention temptations for prizes. At the beginning of each season, the men would weigh in shirtless while the women would wear sports bras. Only as the season progressed and the weight was lost would the contestants have earned or be afforded the dignity of wearing a t-shirt. A contestant from the first Australian season recalled having a challenge where teams were required to drag a plane in 40-degree heat and were only given hot water to drink. Crew and production had cold water with ice, but refused to give any to the contestants. The host in one version states that she had to advocate for the contestants to be allowed to eat at times. Production had the mindset of, they're fat, they need to lose weight, therefore they don't need to eat. Now, guys, no matter whether you're trying to double your body weight, maintain your weight, lose 75% of your body weight, I know they're extreme examples, but the fact remains the same. You need to fucking eat.
Yes, you always need to eat. So, like, your body, well, I'll put it this way, your brain survives on glucose. Without it, it suffocates. So if you just say, oh, I'm just not going to eat for a couple of days. No. Bad. You can throw yourself into insulin shock.
So let's move on to the bloody trainers. There is a direct quote, and now look, there could be Frankenbiting at play, but their actions seen on the show kind of indicates that this is a direct quote. There was going to be blood, sweat, tears, and vomit, and we're going to find a way to get all of them. So contestants would be frequently forced to work out until vomiting, trained to the point of injury. So many contestants tore their Achilles, broke their ankles, ended up with shin splints, or ended up in the hospital with heart problems, yet they'd still be berated and worked like dogs from the trainers. I twisted my ankle 11 years ago, and it's never been the same. I tore a ligament in that same ankle over a year ago, and I still can't run without the pain flaring up. It's never going to fully recover as it is, even with the rest time. So I can't even begin to imagine how much long-term damage would have arisen with these contestants being forced to train through all these injuries.
And when you consider as well, and this would be just the pure physical fact of being in a larger body, you know, for people who are at what we could presume to be an average size, that's already enough force when you fall to the ground. Like you are the weight you are. Like think about this, right? You are the weight you are. You move around with what in your mind is perfect ability. Like you don't think about your ability to amble about the world because you're in your body and you do it every day, right? Now, if someone like switched off power to your legs and you fell to the ground, that is not just you simply falling over. That is all of your body weight plummeting to the earth, and from simply the height at which you stand is enough force to fracture bones, right? And that's just your own body weight. For a lot of us who are like younger and don't live in established households, we often live in cramped spaces where a fall like that wouldn't just mean like falling onto the ground to splay out comfortably. It might mean falling in an awkward position between pieces of furniture that could add further obstacle to injury. All of that plus however many dozens, if not hundreds, of extra pounds or kilos of weight on top of that, becomes a horrifically dangerous situation for a body to be put through. And in a show like this, where they're trying to capture everything on camera, someone who needs immediate medical attention might not actually be getting that immediate medical attention because they need to have the trauma scene of the person crying out in agony on the ground before they call the ambulance, before they get things sorted. And it's just horrific to think that we're coming back to a point of saying it's not just the way you eat or the way we treat you. It's even like you could be in the process of critical injury and we will still treat you with less respect than we would do a normal sized person.
Yeah, absolutely. In my research, I came across a YouTube clip of Your Daddy Commando chastising a contestant to the point where she broke down, telling her she wasn't working hard enough because she only lost 2.7 kilos. Now, again, what a terrible message. You only lost 2.7 kilos in a week. You should be disappointed. You should be breaking down. That's just could have done so much damage.
I was just going to say the wider impact of this stuff is that, like, you would have been relatively young when the show started, right, Sammy?
Yeah, I was 12.
12. Okay. So, and there were kids that were even younger that were watching this because, James, like you said, a lot of parents were watching it. A lot of parents were going to that prime time slot and watching it because it was entertaining for them. So as a kid, you're probably coming in and out of the room. You might stop to watch it a little bit and you see things like this. And then you think, oh God, I wouldn't want that to happen to me. I wouldn't want someone yelling at me, telling me that I'm a waste of space and that I'm useless and that I'm not working hard enough. And oh, I don't ever want that to happen. And then it plants the seed that eventually blossoms into this raging insecurity about criticism surrounding your weight. And this is the kind of conversation that people have when they talk about like things that are this negative that are seen by impressionable people take root and create problems later in life.
I think something else that's worth mentioning here, and Tim, you're gonna love this because I'm aging myself. I am an old person now because I'm speaking to the young ones. I am a 30-something-year-old young person in my brain. But when I was growing up, we did not have on-demand television. We had the 5 networks that were available in Australia. And if it was in primetime slot, it was something that everyone was watching. Which means when you went to school the next day, if you weren't talking about Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z or whatever happened to be on fucking Cheese TV in the morning, you were talking about The Simpsons or The Biggest Loser. And this became commonplace conversation. So something I think that is worth acknowledging is that the reason why certain things become cultural trends is not just because they're good, it's because they were literally structured in such a way as it was supposed to become a cultural trend. It would have always worked out that way, that putting it in that time slot with this kind of content meant that everyone would be talking about it, everyone would be thinking about it. Which means you're absolutely right, Tim. No matter the age of the person walking in or out of the room, even if you're not intending to watch the whole thing, you are still absorbing it by mitosis. You will go to school the next day. You will talk about it because other people are talking about it. And that will make you curious to watch it and tune in and to find out more. And especially at that kind of an age, at 12 years old, tweens into early teens, what a breeding ground for body dysmorphia, for eating disorder.
And think about the way that your peer group is reacting to the things that they saw as well. It's like, so say you were, because we all, James, you and I, we've had a fascination with fat and bellies, and eventually that became us understanding our identities as gainers. But we knew it when we were kids. So say that there's a kid who, thinks that they might be different, has kind of the same thing, a fascination with fat, sees this kind of stuff and is like, oh God, my peer group and everyone I know is reacting in such a negative way to this, criticizing it and, talking down about these people and shitting on them and all this stuff. And but I want this, but I want to either be fat or I want to be with a fat person someday, or however this is going to manifest in the brain before puberty hits. And it's no wonder that there are so many in our community that did not initially embrace it and tried to suppress it for so long. I'm somebody who tried to suppress it for years because of this kind of shit.
I think it points to something very important, not just what it does to fat people and what it does for body image, but also how it affects how we relate to fat people and to the treatment of fat people. This is something we've talked about before, where there is a genuine comment on how people of a smaller size do not inherently understand access needs that larger people have. Why is it a problem that we've parked at the bottom of the hill? Why is it a problem that we're going to go for a walk to get to where we need to go to? Why is it a problem that there's no seating, that it's standing room only? Why is it a problem that we're standing outside in direct heat with no air conditioning? Why is it a problem, etc., etc., etc.? And no, not every larger person is going to have a problem with these things. This is a really powerful episode, I think, to talk about ultimately how something like this has such an influence on our understanding of fatness, our treatment of fatness, the internalized approach to fatness. It is a part of our lives, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, no matter how good or bad it is. So I think this was important for us to talk about. And I just want to ask here, as we begin to round out the episode, does anyone have any other points or things that they want to bring up before we start to close out?
I will say, and we did touch on this a little bit earlier, but these contestants were in a show with prize money involved. So they are going to go to unhealthy measures to lose this weight. And it should never be, no attempt should be made to duplicate these results. In the first Australian season, contestants were reportedly eating 500 calories or less per day. Some contestants had enemas, shaved all the hair off their body. One host and the contestants were like begging production to drug test the person that eventually won a season. And the alleged response from the producers was, we don't want to know. We just want a good winner.
So I think we've reviewed this series. I think it's really interesting to reflect on this show and to talk about it, because again, even though the show is not about gaining and it's not about weight gain at all, it is still about fatness, and it's the most prolific thing that there has ever been on television about fatness. So it is bound to have an influence us on how we perceive the world of fatness in of us and around of us. So thank you, Sammy, for joining us to talk about this episode. As we typically do with our reviews, we normally give it a rating out of 10. And I think just based on honor system, I have to give it a 0. Tim, what about you?
I mean, I never saw it, but just based on the concept and everything that I have found out about it since it started airing and ceased to air, I would also give it a 0, perhaps even in the negative numbers, just because of how damaging it can be.
Oh, it's a definite 0.
Definitely.
I think whether or not it was created with good intentions, no one can deny the harm it created.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Absolutely. And I thought about this while I was making notes for this episode. I tried to think about whether the show could work in some reboot. And I went through a dozen, maybe if they do this, maybe if they do that. But ultimately, I don't think there is a way to redo this show ethically. And if they did, there would, one, still be that toxic stigma of The Biggest Loser of the past. And two, I think anything attempted would just be another wolf in sheep's clothing like the 2020 reboot. So it just needs to stay cancelled, stay dead.
I agree.
But honestly, this has been a really powerful episode, a really deep episode. And obviously, Sammy, you've shared with us some deep things today. And we really, really appreciate that. We love you here. Thank you so much for today. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I love talking with both of you. I'll talk to you about paint drying. I'm for anything.
So listen, mate, where can the listeners find you and the Bondage Gaze online?
Okay, well, the Bondage Gaze is on all good platforms like Spotify, YouTube, anywhere where you get your podcasts, it should be on there. If you can't find it on a particular platform, please DM me and let me know, and I will see what I can do. We also have an Instagram account at The Bondage Gaze. If you want to contact us, though, please don't message the Bondage Gaze account because I don't check that as frequently as I should. You can find me on Instagram at substandardsammy2 for now until I get shut down, or on Twitter as substandardsam. They're the main two I use. I mean, you could email me, substandardsammy@outlook.com, but I'm not likely to check that very frequently.
But that's it for another week here on Thicc Radio. So please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now listen, if you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stannnum and Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.